The world of Jujutsu Kaisen was one where the balance between curses and humanity teetered on a razor's edge, a fragile equilibrium maintained by the efforts of sorcerers who wielded cursed energy to combat the malevolent forces that threatened to consume the living. In this world, Satoru Gojo stood as a titan among men, a sorcerer whose power was unmatched, his presence alone enough to shift the tides of any battle. His 6 eyes and limitless technique made him a living legend, a figure whose name was whispered with reverence and fear. Yet, even Gojo could not foresee the storm brewing on the horizon, a threat that would challenge not only his strength but the very fabric of existence itself. The story began in the heart of Tokyo, where the Jujutsu High headquarters stood as a bastion of hope against the encroaching darkness. Gojo, ever the enigmatic figure, lounged in the training grounds, his blindfold resting lazily over his eyes as he observed his students sparring. Megumi Fushiguro, his stoic and determined protege, clashed with Yuji Itadori, the vessel of Sukuna, whose raw power and unyielding spirit made him a formidable opponent. The air crackled with cursed energy as Megumi summoned his divine dogs, their spectral forms lunging at Yuji with feral precision. Yuji countered with a burst of speed, his fists glowing with cursed energy as he delivered a devastating blow that sent the dogs dissipating into shadows. Gojo chuckled, his voice carrying a mix of amusement and pride. "Not bad, kids, but you'll need more than that if you want to keep up with me." The banter was interrupted by the arrival of Shoko Ieri, the school's resident healer, her expression uncharacteristically grim. "Gojo, we've got a problem," she said, her voice low. "Reports are coming in from the outskirts of the city. An unknown curse has been spotted, and it's different. It's consuming everything in its path, curses, humans, even the land itself. They're calling it the Void Eater." Gojo's playful demeanor vanished in an instant, replaced by a sharp focus that sent a chill through the air. "A curse that consumes curses? Sounds like my kind of party," he said, though the tension in his voice betrayed his concern. "Let's not keep it waiting." As Gojo and his students made their way to the affected area, the devastation was unlike anything they had ever seen. The landscape was barren, as if life itself had been sucked out of it, leaving behind a hollow void. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, a suffocating presence that made even breathing feel like a struggle. In the center of the destruction stood the Void Eater, a grotesque amalgamation of shadows and teeth, its form constantly shifting and writhing as if it were alive. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, and when it spoke, its voice was a cacophony of whispers that sent shivers down their spines. "Satoru Gojo," it hissed, "the one who stands above all. Your infinity will be my feast." Gojo stepped forward, his usual smirk returning as he adjusted his blindfold. "Big words for a walking black hole," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Let's see if you can back them up." The battle began with a blur of motion, Gojo activating his limitless technique to create an impenetrable barrier around himself. The Void Eater lunged, its form expanding to engulf him, but it was met with an invisible wall that halted its advance. Gojo's hand flicked, and a surge of cursed energy erupted, carving through the Void Eater's form like a blade through water. The creature recoiled, its body reforming almost instantly, but Gojo was already in motion, his movements a dance of precision and power. Megumi and Yuji watched in awe as Gojo unleashed his full might, his attacks a symphony of destruction that left the Void Eater reeling. Yet, despite the onslaught, the creature showed no signs of weakening. Its attacks grew more ferocious, its form shifting to adapt to Gojo's techniques. It was as if it were learning, evolving with each strike. Gojo's smirk faltered for the first time, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "This thing. It's not just consuming energy. It's absorbing it, using it to grow stronger," he muttered, his mind racing to find a solution. As the battle raged on, the Void Eater's true nature began to reveal itself. It was not merely a curse, it was a harbinger of something far greater, a force that sought to devour not just the physical world but the very concept of existence. Its whispers grew louder, echoing in their minds with a promise of annihilation. "Infinity is but a fleeting illusion," it taunted. "In the end, all will be consumed by the void." Gojo's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "You talk too much," he said, his voice cold. With a gesture, he summoned his hollow purple technique, a devastating blast of cursed energy that tore through the Void Eater's form, scattering it into nothingness. For a moment, it seemed as though the threat had been neutralized, but the silence that followed was deafening. The air grew heavier, the shadows deeper, and Gojo knew that this was only the beginning. The Void Eater was gone, but its presence lingered, a reminder that something far more sinister was at play. As they returned to Jujutsu High, the weight of what they had witnessed hung over them like a storm cloud. Gojo's usual levity was absent, replaced by a rare seriousness that spoke volumes. "This isn't over," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever that thing was, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to be ready for what's coming." Megumi and Yuji exchanged uneasy glances, their determination unwavering but tempered by the gravity of the situation. The battle had tested their limits, but it had also revealed the true extent of the threat they faced. The Void Eater was not just a curse, it was a warning, a glimpse into a future where the very fabric of reality was at stake. And so, the stage was set for a conflict that would push them to their absolute limits, a battle not just for survival but for the preservation of everything they held dear. The Void Eater had been defeated, but its shadow loomed large, a harbinger of the chaos to come. As the sun set over Tokyo, casting long shadows over the city, Gojo stood atop the Jujutsu High building, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The infinity he had always taken for granted was now at stake, and he knew that the fight ahead would be unlike anything he had ever faced. The Void Eater was just the beginning, and the true enemy was still out there, waiting in the darkness. The air was thick with tension as Gojo Satoru stood at the edge of the battlefield, his infinity barrier shimmering faintly in the dim light. The Void Eater loomed in the distance, its formless body shifting and pulsating, a grotesque amalgamation of darkness and hunger. The fight in Part 1 had left both combatants battered but unyielding, and now, as the dust settled, a new layer of danger began to unfold. Gojo's sharp instincts picked up on something, an unsettling presence lurking just beyond the edges of the battlefield. It wasn't the Void Eater, it was something else, something colder, more calculating. Before Gojo could fully process the new threat, the ground beneath him trembled violently. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in cursed energy, their face obscured by a mask of shifting runes. The newcomer's voice was a low, mocking whisper that sent chills down even Gojo's spine. "Infinity is a fragile concept, isn't it, Gojo Satoru? What happens when it's no longer yours to control?" The figure raised a hand, and Gojo felt a sudden, jarring disruption in his cursed energy. His infinity barrier flickered, then wavered, as if being pulled apart by an unseen force. The Void Eater, sensing weakness, surged forward, its massive form crashing toward Gojo with terrifying speed. Gojo's mind raced. This new enemy, whoever they were, had the ability to interfere with his technique. He couldn't rely solely on infinity anymore. With a sharp exhale, he deactivated the barrier, opting instead for raw speed and precision. He dodged the Void Eater's attack by a hair's breadth, his movements a blur as he repositioned himself. "Interesting," Gojo muttered, his tone light but his eyes deadly serious. "2 against 1? I guess I'll have to step up my game." The masked figure chuckled, their cursed energy flaring as they began to weave a complex pattern in the air. Gojo recognized the signs of a domain expansion, but before it could fully manifest, he acted. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a concentrated blast of blue, the gravitational force ripping through the air and forcing the figure to abandon their technique. The Void Eater, meanwhile, had recovered from its missed attack and was now circling Gojo, its form undulating like a storm cloud. Gojo knew he couldn't afford to split his focus for long. As the battle intensified, a new development unfolded. From the periphery of the battlefield, a group of Jujutsu sorcerers arrived, led by none other than Megumi Fushiguro. Their arrival was timely but fraught with tension. Megumi's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene: Gojo, the Void Eater, and the mysterious masked figure. "Gojo-sensei," Megumi called out, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "We've got a problem. There's a secondary curse spreading through the city. It's feeding on the residual energy from your fight." Gojo's expression darkened. A secondary curse? That explained the strange presence he'd felt earlier. But why now? And why here? His thoughts were interrupted as the masked figure spoke again, their voice dripping with malice. "Oh, did I forget to mention? The Void Eater isn't just here for you, Gojo. It's here for everything. And now, thanks to your little skirmish, the city is ripe for the taking." Megumi's fists clenched. "We need to end this fast," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Gojo nodded, his usual playful demeanor replaced by a grim determination. "All right, kids," he said, addressing the group. "Let's show them what we're made of." The battle erupted once more, this time with the added complexity of the secondary curse. The sorcerers split into teams, some focusing on containing the spreading curse while others joined Gojo in the fight against the Void Eater and the masked figure. Megumi summoned his divine dogs, their forms materializing in a burst of shadows. He directed them to flank the Void Eater, their sharp teeth and claws tearing into its amorphous body. The creature roared in pain, its form writhing as it tried to shake off the attack. Meanwhile, Gojo faced off against the masked figure, their cursed energy clashing in a dazzling display of power. The figure's ability to disrupt infinity was a serious threat, but Gojo was far from defenseless. He combined red and blue, creating a devastating vortex of energy that forced the figure to retreat. "You're good," Gojo admitted, his voice laced with a hint of admiration. "But you're not good enough." The figure responded with a barrage of curse techniques, each one more intricate than the last. Gojo countered with precision, his movements fluid and deliberate. He knew he couldn't afford to make a single mistake. As the fight dragged on, Gojo began to notice something, a pattern in the figure's attacks. They were testing him, probing for weaknesses. But why? What was their endgame? The answer came in the form of a sudden, deafening explosion. The secondary curse, now fully unleashed, had begun to consume the city's energy at an alarming rate. Buildings crumbled, and the sky darkened as the curse's influence spread. The sorcerers fighting to contain it were struggling, their efforts barely making a dent. Gojo realized with a sinking feeling that this was the masked figure's plan all along, to distract him with the Void Eater while the secondary curse grew unchecked. "Megumi," Gojo shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to redirect the Void Eater's energy. Use it to counteract the secondary curse." Megumi understood immediately. He began to weave a complex series of hand signs, his divine dogs merging into a single, massive shadow creature. With a roar, the shadow lunged at the Void Eater, its form expanding to envelop the creature. The Void Eater thrashed violently, but Megumi held firm, his cursed energy flaring as he channeled the creature's power. Gojo, meanwhile, turned his full attention to the masked figure. "You've had your fun," he said, his voice cold. "Now it's my turn." He unleashed a devastating combination of red and blue, the energy converging into a single, blinding point of light. The figure tried to counter, but their technique faltered under the sheer force of Gojo's attack. With a final, deafening blast, the figure was sent flying, their mask shattering as they crashed to the ground. As the dust settled, Gojo approached the fallen figure, his infinity barrier flickering back into place. He knelt beside them, his expression unreadable. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low. The figure coughed, their face now visible, a face Gojo recognized. It was someone he had once called an ally, someone he had trusted. The betrayal cut deep, but there was no time to dwell on it. The secondary curse was still spreading, and the Void Eater, though weakened, was far from defeated. Gojo stood, his resolve hardening. "This isn't over," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He turned to Megumi and the others, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We end this now. No more games." The sorcerers nodded, their determination matching his own. Together, they prepared for the final push, their cursed energy intertwining as they faced the dual threats of the Void Eater and the secondary curse. The stakes had never been higher, and failure was not an option. As the battle reached its climax, Gojo couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The masked figure's betrayal hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that threatened not just the city, but the very fabric of the Jujutsu world. But for now, all that mattered was the fight at hand. With a deep breath, Gojo stepped forward, his infinity barrier glowing brighter than ever. The Void Eater roared, its form surging with renewed energy, and the final clash began. The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of cursed energy, the air crackling with tension as Gojo Satoru and the Void Eater clashed in a duel of cosmic proportions. The Void Eater, a monstrous entity born from the convergence of cursed spirits and human despair, loomed over the shattered remains of Tokyo, its form shifting between solidity and a swirling abyss. Gojo, his limitless technique pushed to its absolute limit, danced around the creature's attacks with his signature precision, his 6 eyes glowing like twin stars in the night. But even he could feel the strain. The Void Eater's attacks were relentless, each strike threatening to unravel the very fabric of reality. The stakes were clear: if the Void Eater consumed Gojo's infinity, the world would be plunged into eternal darkness. Amidst the chaos, a new presence emerged, cutting through the battlefield like a blade of light. A figure clad in a flowing black and gold robe stepped into the fray, their movements fluid and deliberate. Their face was obscured by a mask resembling a snarling Oni, but their cursed energy was unmistakable, a volatile mix of raw power and controlled precision. The figure raised a hand, and a wave of cursed energy surged forward, forcing both Gojo and the Void Eater to momentarily halt their clash. "Enough," the figure declared, their voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "This ends now." Gojo narrowed his eyes, his 6 eyes analyzing the newcomer. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone light but laced with suspicion. The figure removed their mask, revealing a striking face framed by silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "My name is Akira Tsukiyomi," they said, their voice calm but commanding. A sorcerer from the shadows, here to ensure the balance of this world isn't destroyed by your recklessness. Gojo smirked, though his guard remained up. Recklessness? I'd say I'm doing a pretty good job holding this thing back. Care to lend a hand, or are you just here to critique? Akira's gaze shifted to the Void Eater, their expression hardening. This creature is beyond your comprehension, Gojo Satoru. It's not just a cursed spirit, it's a manifestation of humanity's collective fear of the unknown. To defeat it, you'll need more than brute force. Before Gojo could respond, the Void Eater roared, its form expanding as it unleashed a torrent of dark energy. Akira moved with blinding speed, their hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. A barrier of golden light materialized, absorbing the attack and dispersing it harmlessly. Stay focused, Akira snapped, their tone sharp. If you let your guard down, even for a second, it will consume you. The arrival of Akira Tsukiyomi shifted the dynamics of the battle in ways Gojo hadn't anticipated. While their power was undeniable, their motives were shrouded in mystery. Were they an ally, a rival, or something else entirely? Gojo's instincts told him to tread carefully, but the urgency of the situation left little room for hesitation. All right, Shadow Sorcerer, he said, his tone more serious now. Let's see what you've got. The two sorcerers moved in tandem, their attacks complementing each other in a deadly dance. Gojo unleashed a barrage of hollow purple techniques, the concentrated energy tearing through the Void Eater's defenses. Akira countered with their own unique abilities, summoning ethereal chains that bound the creature and disrupted its cursed energy flow. The Void Eater thrashed violently, its form flickering as it struggled to break free. Now, Akira shouted, their voice cutting through the chaos. Gojo nodded, channeling his cursed energy into a devastating attack. The resulting explosion lit up the night sky, the shockwave rippling across the city. But the Void Eater wasn't so easily defeated. As the smoke cleared, the creature emerged, its form more unstable but no less dangerous. It's adapting, Akira muttered, their brow furrowed in concentration. We need to hit it with everything we've got, or it'll just keep coming back stronger. Gojo grinned, though his expression was strained. Sounds like a plan. Let's finish this. The battle intensified, each exchange pushing the sorcerers to their limits. Akira's presence added a new layer of complexity to the fight, their techniques forcing Gojo to adapt his strategies on the fly. At one point, Akira unleashed a technique called Celestial Eclipse, summoning a massive orb of cursed energy that hovered above the battlefield. The orb pulsed with power, its light casting eerie shadows across the ruins. This will weaken it, Akira explained, their voice tight with exertion. But it's up to you to deliver the final blow. Gojo nodded, his 6 eyes locking onto the Void Eater's core. Got it. Just don't let that thing crush us in the process. As the celestial eclipse descended, the Void Eater let out a deafening roar, its form writhing as it tried to resist the technique's effects. Gojo seized the opportunity, channeling all of his cursed energy into a single, concentrated attack. The resulting explosion was blinding, the force of it sending shockwaves across the city. When the light finally faded, the Void Eater was gone, its cursed energy dissipating into the air. But the victory was short-lived. As Gojo and Akira caught their breath, a rift opened in the sky, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. What now? Gojo muttered, his tone equal parts exasperated and wary. Akira's expression was grim. This isn't over, they said. The Void Eater was just the beginning. There's something far worse coming, and we're not ready for it. The revelation sent a chill down Gojo's spine. He had always been confident in his abilities, but Akira's words planted a seed of doubt. Who were they, really? And what did they know about the forces threatening the world? As the rift continued to grow, Gojo realized that the battle ahead would test not only his strength but also his trust in others. The arrival of Akira Tsukiyomi had shifted the balance, introducing new motives and hidden ties that complicated the conflict in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. As the two sorcerers stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the growing darkness, Gojo couldn't help but wonder if this was a fight they could truly win. The stakes had never been higher, and the line between ally and enemy had never been more blurred. The battle for infinity was far from over, and the world's fate hung in the balance. The battlefield was a maelstrom of cursed energy, the air thick with the oppressive weight of Gojo Satoru's limitless technique and the Void Eater's insatiable hunger. The clash between the two titans had reached a fever pitch, with Gojo's infinity barrier flickering under the relentless assault of the Void Eater's void-like maw. The ground beneath them was torn asunder, chunks of earth and debris floating in the air, suspended by the chaotic interplay of their powers. Gojo's usual smirk was absent, replaced by a grim determination as he calculated his next move. The Void Eater, a grotesque amalgamation of cursed energy and emptiness, loomed before him, its form shifting and distorting as if it existed in a state of perpetual instability. Its hollow eyes bore into Gojo, and its voice, a guttural echo, reverberated through the battlefield. Infinity cannot save you, Satoru Gojo. Your power is finite, while my hunger is eternal. Gojo's mind raced as he dodged another devastating strike, the Void Eater's claws tearing through the air with enough force to rend space itself. He had underestimated the creature's adaptability. Every time he thought he had the upper hand, the Void Eater evolved, its cursed energy mutating to counter his techniques. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for him, but for the entire Jujutsu world. If the Void Eater consumed him, it would gain access to his limitless technique, rendering it unstoppable. The thought sent a chill down his spine, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the fight. He couldn't afford to falter now. As the battle raged on, Gojo noticed something peculiar. The Void Eater's attacks were becoming more erratic, its movements less precise. It was as if the creature was struggling to maintain its form, its cursed energy fluctuating wildly. Gojo's sharp instincts kicked in. Is it overextending itself? He muttered under his breath. He decided to test his theory, feigning a retreat to lure the Void Eater into a trap. The creature took the bait, surging forward with a deafening roar, its maw widening to consume everything in its path. Gojo's eyes narrowed as he activated his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. The battlefield was engulfed in an infinite expanse of blinding light, the Void Eater's movement slowing to a crawl as it was bombarded with an overwhelming influx of information. For a moment, it seemed like Gojo had gained the upper hand. But then, something unexpected happened. The Void Eater's form began to stabilize, its cursed energy coalescing into a more refined, concentrated state. Its hollow eyes gleamed with a newfound intelligence as it spoke, its voice dripping with malice. You think your domain can contain me? Foolish. I am the void itself. Your techniques are but a drop in the ocean of my existence. Gojo's eyes widened in shock as the Void Eater broke free from his domain, its power surging to unprecedented levels. The creature's true nature was revealed, it wasn't just a cursed spirit. It was a manifestation of the void between dimensions, a being that existed outside the laws of reality. Its hunger wasn't just for cursed energy, it sought to consume existence itself. The revelation hit Gojo like a sledgehammer. His usual confidence wavered as he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a fight he could win through brute force alone. He needed a new strategy, and fast. As the Void Eater advanced, its form now a swirling vortex of darkness, Gojo's mind raced through countless possibilities. He thought back to his training, his battles, and the lessons he had learned from his students. If I can't destroy it, maybe I can seal it, he thought. But sealing a being of this magnitude would require an immense amount of cursed energy and a flawless execution. One misstep, and it would be the end of him. The Void Eater's attacks grew more ferocious, its void-like tendrils lashing out with devastating precision. Gojo's infinity barrier strained under the onslaught, cracks beginning to form in its once impenetrable defense. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer. Desperation crept into his movements as he dodged and countered, his cursed energy reserves dwindling with each passing second. The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of his responsibility bore down on him like a mountain. He couldn't fail. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. In a moment of clarity, Gojo remembered something Yaga had once told him. True strength isn't just about power. It's about understanding your limits and finding a way to overcome them. Those words resonated with him now as he faced the Void Eater. He couldn't defeat it through sheer force, but maybe he could outsmart it. With a renewed sense of purpose, Gojo began to formulate a plan. He would use the Void Eater's own nature against it. If the creature existed outside the laws of reality, then perhaps he could exploit that to trap it in a paradoxical state, rendering it unable to act. Summoning the last of his cursed energy, Gojo activated his hollow technique, Purple. The swirling mass of positive and negative energy shot toward the Void Eater, but instead of aiming to destroy, Gojo manipulated the technique to create a self-contained loop of cursed energy. The Void Eater, drawn to the immense power, lunged forward to consume it. But as it did, the loop closed in on itself, trapping the creature in a paradoxical state of existence and non-existence. The Void Eater let out a deafening roar as it struggled against the trap, its form flickering in and out of reality. Gojo watched with bated breath, his body trembling from exhaustion. The plan had worked, for now. But he knew it was only a temporary solution. The Void Eater was too powerful to be contained indefinitely. He needed to find a way to seal it permanently, and that would require help. As the battlefield fell silent, Gojo's thoughts turned to his students and allies. He had always prided himself on being the strongest, but now he realized that even he had limits. The fight against the Void Eater had humbled him, forcing him to confront his own vulnerabilities. But it had also given him a new sense of purpose. He would protect the world, not just through his strength, but through the bonds he had forged with others. As the dust settled, Gojo stood amidst the ruins, his infinity barrier flickering weakly. The Void Eater's roars echoed in the distance, a grim reminder of the battle that still lay ahead. But for now, he had bought himself some time. The fight was far from over, but Gojo was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. With a deep breath, he turned and walked away, his mind already racing with plans for the next phase of the battle. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was his resolve. The Void Eater had underestimated him, and that would be its downfall. The aftermath of the shocking twist reverberated through the Jujutsu High headquarters. Gojo Satoru, the strongest sorcerer, stood at the center of the chaos, his infinity technique flickering erratically as the Void Eater's curse energy seeped into the very fabric of reality. The enemy had revealed its true power, an insatiable hunger capable of devouring cursed energy, even the limitless. The stakes had never been higher. If the Void Eater consumed Gojo's infinity, the balance of the world would collapse, and humanity would be left defenseless against the tide of curses. The clock was ticking, and the sorcerers had no choice but to act. Yuji Itadori and Megumi Fushiguro were the first to regroup, their faces etched with determination. "We can't let it win," Yuji said, his fists clenched. "Gojo-sensei's infinity is the only thing keeping it at bay. If it falls, we're done for." Megumi nodded, his shadows swirling around him like restless spirits. "We need to find a way to exploit its weakness. It can't be invincible." "Nothing is." The two of them began poring over ancient texts and cursed object records, searching for any clue that could give them an edge. Meanwhile, Nobara Kujisaki and Maki Zenin took to the field, gathering intelligence on the Void Eater's movements. Every second counted, and the team worked in perfect sync, driven by the urgency of their mission. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The Void Eater's presence grew stronger, its influence spreading like a plague. Cursed spirits that had once been dormant now roamed freely, drawn to the overwhelming energy of the Void Eater. The sorcerers trained relentlessly, pushing their limits to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Yuji honed his cursed energy control, channeling Sukuna's power with newfound precision. Megumi experimented with his 10 Shadows technique, summoning Shikigami that had never before answered his call. Nobara refined her resonance technique, aiming to disrupt the Void Eater's cursed energy flow. And Maki, armed with her cursed tools, practiced her agility and precision, determined to strike at the heart of the enemy. Gojo, though weakened, remained a pillar of strength for the team. "The Void Eater thrives on consumption," he explained during a strategy meeting. "But it's not just cursed energy it devours, it feeds on fear, doubt, and despair. That's why we can't afford to falter. We need to hit it with everything we've got, all at once. Overwhelm it before it can adapt." His words galvanized the group, and they began devising a plan that would require perfect coordination and timing. The key, they realized, lay in exploiting the Void Eater's singular focus. If they could distract it, even for a moment, they might be able to strike a decisive blow. The day of the confrontation arrived, and the battlefield was a desolate wasteland, scarred by the Void Eater's relentless hunger. The air crackled with cursed energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Gojo stood at the forefront, his infinity flickering like a dying flame. "Remember the plan," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Stick together, and don't hold back." The team nodded, their resolve unshakable. The Void Eater emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and writhing like a living void. It let out a deafening roar, and the ground split open, revealing a chasm of cursed energy. Yuji charged forward, his fists glowing with cursed energy. "Let's see how you handle this," he shouted, unleashing a barrage of punches that sent shockwaves through the air. The Void Eater absorbed the blows effortlessly, but Yuji's attack was just the beginning. Megumi summoned his divine dogs, their fangs bared as they lunged at the enemy. Nobara fired her nails, each one imbued with cursed energy, aiming for the Void Eater's core. Maki darted through the chaos, her cursed tools slicing through the air with deadly precision. The Void Eater retaliated with a wave of cursed energy, forcing the team to scatter. Gojo stepped in, his infinity flaring to life as he deflected the attack. "Not so fast," he said, his voice laced with defiance. He unleashed a hollow purple, the devastating technique tearing through the Void Eater's defenses. The enemy staggered, but it was far from defeated. It began to adapt, its form shifting to counter their attacks. The team realized they were running out of time. In a desperate move, Megumi summoned Maharega, the 8-handled sword. The Shikigami's presence was overwhelming, its cursed energy clashing with the Void Eater's. "This is our chance," Megumi shouted. Hit it now. Yuji and Nobara combined their techniques, creating a resonance that disrupted the Void Eater's energy flow. Maki struck from above, her cursed tools piercing the enemy's core. Gojo unleashed another hollow purple, this time with all his remaining strength. The combined attack was blinding, a burst of light and energy that consumed the battlefield. When the dust settled, the Void Eater lay defeated, its form dissipating into nothingness. The team stood victorious, but the cost had been high. Gojo's infinity was nearly depleted, and the strain of the battle had left them all exhausted. Yet, amidst the wreckage, there was a glimmer of hope. They had faced overwhelming odds and emerged stronger, their bonds unbreakable. The fight was far from over, but they had proven that even the strongest enemy could be brought down with determination, strategy, and unity. As they regrouped, Gojo looked at his students with pride. "You've all grown so much," he said, a rare smile on his face. "But this is just the beginning. The Void Eater was only the first of many challenges we'll face. Stay sharp, and never forget what we're fighting for." The team nodded, their spirits renewed. They had faced the abyss and emerged stronger, ready to take on whatever came next. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was their resolve. Together, they would protect the world, no matter the cost. The air crackled with cursed energy as Gojo Satoru stood at the edge of the battlefield, his piercing blue eyes locked onto the monstrous form of the Void Eater. The creature loomed like a living abyss, its form shifting and writhing, devouring the very fabric of space around it. The stakes had never been higher, infinity itself hung in the balance, and Gojo knew that failure here would mean the end of everything. Across the battlefield, the Void Eater let out a guttural roar, its voice echoing like the collapse of a dying star. Gojo smirked, his confidence unshaken, but beneath his usual bravado, he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was no ordinary foe, and he would need to push himself beyond his limits to emerge victorious. The battle erupted in an instant. Gojo launched forward, his movements a blur as he closed the distance between himself and the Void Eater. His limitless technique activated, creating an invisible barrier that distorted space around him. The Void Eater responded with a devastating swipe of its clawed appendage, but Gojo twisted midair, his body bending impossibly to evade the attack. He countered with a burst of cursed energy, firing a concentrated blast of blue directly at the creature's core. The Void Eater roared in pain as the attack struck, but it quickly retaliated, opening its gaping maw to unleash a torrent of void energy. Gojo raised his hand, activating infinity to nullify the attack, but the sheer force of the energy pushed him back, his boots skidding across the cracked ground. The Void Eater wasn't giving him a moment to breathe. It surged forward, its massive form moving with surprising speed, and slammed into Gojo with the force of a collapsing dimension. Gojo grunted as he was sent flying, but he twisted his body midair, using his mastery of cursed energy to stabilize himself. He landed gracefully, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. This creature was unlike anything he'd faced before. It wasn't just strong, it was adapting. Every attack he launched seemed to be absorbed or countered, and its cursed energy was growing stronger with each passing moment. Gojo knew he couldn't afford to hold back any longer. With a deep breath, Gojo unleashed his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. The world around him shifted, the battlefield dissolving into an endless expanse of white. The Void Eater froze, its movement slowing to a crawl as the infinite information of the domain flooded its mind. Gojo moved in for the kill, his hand glowing with the power of red, the reversed curse technique that could obliterate anything in its path. But just as he was about to strike, the Void Eater let out a deafening screech, and the domain began to crack. Gojo's eyes widened in shock as the creature's cursed energy surged, shattering the domain and sending him flying backward. The Void Eater had adapted again. It wasn't just immune to the effects of unlimited void, it had absorbed the domain's energy, making itself even stronger. Gojo gritted his teeth, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a new strategy. He couldn't rely on his usual techniques, he needed something more. Something unpredictable. He clenched his fists, his cursed energy flaring as he pushed himself to his absolute limit. His 6 eyes glowed brighter than ever, analyzing every possible move, every possible outcome. He was running out of time, but he refused to give up. The Void Eater charged again, its form shifting into a whirlwind of darkness as it closed in on Gojo. This time, Gojo didn't dodge. Instead, he stood his ground, his body radiating with cursed energy. At the last possible moment, he activated a new technique, a fusion of blue and red, creating a swirling vortex of cursed energy that tore through the fabric of reality itself. The Void Eater was caught off guard, its momentum halted as the vortex engulfed it. The creature roared in agony, its form beginning to unravel as the conflicting forces of attraction and repulsion tore it apart from the inside. But the Void Eater wasn't done yet. With a final, desperate surge of energy, it broke free from the vortex, its form now more unstable than ever. It lunged at Gojo, its claws extended, but Gojo was ready. He raised his hand, his cursed energy condensing into a single, devastating point. Hollow purple, he muttered, and the energy erupted in a blinding flash of light. The attack struck the Void Eater head-on, tearing through its body and obliterating it in an instant. The shockwave from the blast sent Gojo flying backward, his body slamming into the ground with bone-jarring force. For a moment, there was silence. The battlefield was a wasteland, the ground scorched and cracked from the intensity of the battle. Gojo lay on his back, his breathing ragged, his body battered and bruised. But he was alive. The Void Eater was gone, its cursed energy dissipating into the air. Gojo let out a shaky laugh, his usual smirk returning to his face. "Guess I still got it," he said, though his voice was weak. But as he tried to sit up, he felt a sudden surge of cursed energy. His eyes widened as he realized the truth: the Void Eater wasn't completely destroyed. Its essence had merged with the battlefield, its cursed energy seeping into the ground. The air grew heavy, and the sky darkened as the creature began to reform, its presence more menacing than ever. Gojo's smirk faded, replaced by a look of grim determination. He pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling with exhaustion but his resolve unshaken. "Guess we're not done yet," he muttered, his cursed energy flaring once more. The final clash was a blur of motion and energy. Gojo and the Void Eater moved faster than the eye could follow, their attacks colliding with the force of a supernova. Gojo pushed himself harder than ever before, his movements becoming more fluid, more precise. He adapted to the Void Eater's attacks, countering with techniques he'd never used before. The battlefield was a chaotic storm of cursed energy, the ground cracking and shifting with each blow. Gojo's 6 eyes glowed brighter than ever, his mind working overtime to keep up with the creature's relentless assault. In the end, it was Gojo's sheer willpower that turned the tide. With a final, desperate surge of energy, he unleashed a new technique, a combination of all his abilities, fused into a single, devastating attack. The energy erupted from his body, a blinding light that consumed everything in its path. The Void Eater let out a final, ear-splitting roar as it was obliterated, its cursed energy dissipating into nothingness. Gojo collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. The battlefield was silent, the air still and heavy. He looked up at the sky, his breathing ragged, but a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He'd done it. He'd pushed past his limits, adapted to the impossible, and emerged victorious. But as he sat there, catching his breath, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Void Eater was gone, but the battle for infinity was far from over. And Gojo Satoru would be ready for whatever came next. The air crackled with cursed energy, the battlefield a chaotic storm of destruction as Gojo Satoru faced the Void Eater, a monstrous entity that threatened to consume all of existence. The clash had reached its zenith, both combatants pushed to their absolute limits. Gojo's infinity barrier flickered under the relentless assault of the Void Eater's devouring maw, a swirling abyss that seemed to erase reality itself with every strike. Sweat dripped down Gojo's face, his usual smirk replaced by a grim determination. He had never faced an opponent like this, one that could challenge even his godlike control over space and time. The Void Eater roared, its form shifting and writhing, a living void that defied comprehension. Its attacks were unpredictable, tearing through the fabric of reality and forcing Gojo to constantly adapt, his 6 eyes working overtime to process the chaos. Gojo's breath came in ragged gasps as he dodged another devastating strike, the ground beneath him disintegrating into nothingness. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. The Void Eater was relentless, its power growing with every passing moment as it fed on the cursed energy saturating the battlefield. Gojo clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had to end this now, before the Void Eater grew too powerful to stop. With a surge of cursed energy, he activated his domain expansion, Unlimited Void, the space around him warping as infinite knowledge flooded the area. But the Void Eater didn't falter. It absorbed the domain's effects, its form expanding as it fed on the limitless information. Gojo's eyes widened in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. His domain, his ultimate technique, had failed. The Void Eater lunged, its maw opening wide, ready to consume Gojo and everything around him. Gojo's mind raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of desperation and determination. He couldn't die here. Not like this. Not when so much was at stake. With a roar of defiance, he unleashed a technique he had never used before, a fusion of his limitless and hollow purple techniques. The energy surged around him, a swirling vortex of destruction and creation, a paradox that defied the laws of reality. The Void Eater hesitated, its form flickering as the conflicting energies clashed. Gojo poured every ounce of his strength into the attack, his body trembling with the strain. The battlefield was consumed in a blinding light, the shockwave rippling through the fabric of existence. When the light faded, Gojo stood alone, his body battered and broken, but alive. The Void Eater was gone, its form erased from existence. The battlefield was silent, the air heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Gojo collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He had done it. He had defeated the Void Eater. But at what cost? The energy he had unleashed had reshaped the universe itself, the very fabric of reality altered by the clash of their powers. The world around him was different, the sky a swirling mass of colors, the ground cracked and unstable. Gojo's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the extent of the damage. He had saved existence, but at the cost of its stability. As he struggled to his feet, Gojo's thoughts turned to his students, to the future he had fought so hard to protect. What kind of world would they inherit now? The aftermath of the battle was already beginning to unfold, the consequences of his actions rippling through time and space. The balance of cursed energy had been disrupted, the barriers between dimensions weakened. New threats would emerge, drawn to the instability. Gojo knew he couldn't rest, not yet. The fight was far from over. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of respite, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had pushed himself to the brink, and beyond. He had achieved a breakthrough, unlocking a power he had never thought possible. But it had come at a cost, one that would reshape the universe and the future dynamics of the world he had fought so hard to protect. The battle had ended, but the war was just beginning. Gojo's actions had set the stage for a new era, one filled with uncertainty and danger. But he was ready. He had faced the void and emerged victorious. And he would do it again, no matter the cost. The world had changed, but so had he. And together, they would face whatever came next. The final battle's defining moment had determined the outcome, but the true impact of their actions would be felt for generations to come. The universe had been reshaped, the future rewritten. And Gojo Satoru, the strongest sorcerer, would be there to guide it, no matter what challenges lay ahead.